rise above the static, dissecting issues diplomatic. With mics in hand, they brave the storm of clashing views and norms transform. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining lights on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they pause the spinning and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view.
Hey everybody, it's Razib, and yeah, we're at conversation number 30. Uh, so that's 30 episodes. Mostly me and my friend Josiah, who I think most of you know that last week we had a guest, Paxton Dickinson. So we're back to the usual crew here and talking about the usual things. So one thing I want to talk about, we've talked about focusing on culture a little bit after the election. We really haven't done it too much, but I think maybe we should try a little bit. So, I'm not a big cultural commentator. I mean, I live in the culture, so obviously experience it, and I've seen some differences over my life. Uh, when I was a kid, I remember very, very abruptly the shift from what was it? Kinda like glam metal on MTV to alternative, like, it happened in, like, maybe, like, a year in the early 1990s, and I remember, like, reading that part of that had to do with, the arrival of SoundScan, and they could track what was selling in terms of CDs,
Yeah.
very, very precisely, and all of a sudden, they saw that, Alice in Chains and all these, like, Nirvana, obviously, and all these like Seattle bands that were not glam were selling really well. And the glam metal, well, I mean, it wasn't, but these older, CEOs and recording executives were into this sort of rock, so it was kind of biased that way. So that just shifted immediately. And over the decades, I mean, rock and roll has kind of disappeared in a lot of ways, but hip hop has kind of taken the center as a dominant musical form. But what I wanna talk about now is, like, movies. We're in our, let's say we're in the 45 to 50 range, okay? We're in the range of those let's just say we're in that range, we're those people, and, so we in, like, the around the year 2000, we were around 20, let's put it that way, and so we were kind of adults, but we were very, very young adults,
Yeah.
and, we always joke about this, and 1999 is the best year. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons we study this is, Pulp Fiction, was it American Beauty?
Right.
There was some other stuff. Was Shakespeare in Love that year? No, no, no. Fight Club. I think Fight Club was in '99. Uh, so
Well,
yeah, there were all these films that came out in that year. A lot of them were independent films, and it was great year for film. But little do we know that I think that was, in terms of independent creativity, separate from the capitalist, motive of the movies need to make money, that was probably, a local peak within the last, since the 1970s, that was probably like the peak around the year 2000, right before. And since then, it's all gone downhill. That's my perception. But you know what? That dovetails perfectly with the theory that movies and music are better when you're younger, and
right.
as we've gotten older, but this is what sometimes it's not that. So what do you think?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I will say, and I've talked with people who are both younger than us and older than us, and there does seem to be a consensus that, that like, especially in the last few years, I mean, movies have kind of gone downhill. Um, and they've been transformed. So I have a couple of theories about this, why this might be, kind of broader perspectives. Uh, and most of them are like kind of broader economic, cultural forces, although I have one that's about personalities. But back in the 90s, I would say it was kind of a golden age for movies, But, uh, well, let me say that, let me say it this way. If you look back in time, there's certain periods that are considered to be golden ages for movies, and there are certain periods that are considered to be golden ages for television, and they don't always line up, right? So sometimes you can have a period where there's a lot of great movies, but the stuff that's on TV is just kind of lame, right? And I don't know. In the '90s, I don't know that that was actually true. I think that there was some like good stuff that was on television or whatever. But just if you think about the development of the technology, um, television, I would say, at least when you talk to people, they'll say it's gotten better. And I think that has to do with the rise of so-called prestige television, right? So the stuff that's on, there still are networks out there. I don't know the last time you actually watched network TV, Razib, is, but
Uh,
yeah, I know. The only time I ever watch it is if, like, basically if I am in some sort of waiting room, like I'm waiting to get my car's oil changed, or if I'm like in the hospital for some reason and I'm waiting. But it like sitcoms in particular, I don't know if they were always like this, but they're just like they're stylized in a way that's very weird. But when you get used to it, you don't really notice it. But like the way that the plots work and like the characters, everything's like kind of exaggerated in a strange, surreal kind of like kabuki type fashion. So
what's
tho
up with that?
yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, I'm sure it's just like the style. I don't know, but it's not good, right? Let me just put it that way. Like if you turn on like network TV today, no offense, but like a lot of it is not that great. Um, but there's more prestige type stuff that's out there, whether it's on Netflix or HBO or whatever, that people at least say is really good. Okay. And that has to do with like different economic, or structural factors. Like if you're doing a show for network TV, like it's got to be on every week at 7:30 on a Tuesday. And, since it's on network, uh, you know, what you can do on there is pretty restricted, and you got to appeal to like a really broad audience. Whereas if you have something, like if you have something that's on cable or if it's on Netflix or whatever, you can release it all at once. It can be like a discrete story. It can be successful even if it appeals to a smaller audience, right? So this is kind of part of my thinking is in the '90s, film was much more like that. You could have a lot of independent films. You could produce something. Maybe you could make a movie for 8, $10 million, and it wasn't going to be a blockbuster, but it could make $40 million, right? And that you could make a good living that way, and it could be more sophisticated. It could be, it wouldn't have to be broad, right? You want something that's going to appeal to a lot of people, it's got to be kind of broad. And I think what has happened with movies is the first thing that happened is they went international, right? Like most movies these days, it's all about not just the American market, but the overseas market. And that favors certain types of stories over others, right? Like one reason I think that like I mean comic book superhero type movies, action type movies are big or a lot bigger now is that those translate. Like those are kind of culturally universal in a way that a comedy is not. Like comedy tends to be very culture specific, and even a lot of dramas, like stuff, a guy who's in Tokyo or Beijing, or Calcutta, he's not necessarily gonna jive with that, but like everybody can understand a guy punching a giant monster, right? So and then and there also all are like cultural, other cultural standards and whatnot. So that I think is a big thing that has kind of like killed off a lot of movies. And then the other thing that I would say is Uh, and part of this, I think this was really accelerated by the pandemic, um, but it was a pre-existing trend, which is like movies just don't have the same cultural space as they used to because like now everybody like you can get almost every movie at your home, through streaming, and a lot of people have like a giant TV screen which is as big as a wall. It's not as big as the screen in the theater, but you can sit closer and you can like you don't have to wear pants, you don't have to like buy the ticket, you don't.
TMI, Josiah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, whether I wear pants while I'm watching movies or not is, I'm just speaking generally, right? Um, so yeah, like if you go to a movie theater now, one thing that I've noticed because I have been to a few movies in the past year, especially now. Like my kids are a little older, they like to go see like kids themed stuff. One thing I've noticed is first, it's the theaters. Um, They se like, they seem like the seats are like, it used to be you would go into a theater and there would be, I don't know, like, it would seem like there's 150 seats in the theater, you know? And they're, like, small, like, they're small seats, they're like, um, like a school auditorium or something, right? It's packed in, lots of rows. Now you go in and there's, like, I don't know, there's, like, 5 rows, and each of the rows has maybe, like 7, 8 seats, they're, like, huge seats, they're recliners, right? And but it's just, like, obviously, they can accommodate a lot fewer people through showing, and then it seems like there's fewer showings, like, you look for movie times, and the theater, it's like, I don't know, they're showing this movie 3 times during the day or whatnot, you know? So it's gotta like, that's just my perception is that it's totally many fewer people are obviously going to the movies and watching movies that way, and that's gotta have effects in terms of, like, what can get made, like art house type films. There's still some people who manage to do that, but, um, like, it's gotten harder, and I think they have to like, Woody Allen, I don't actually I don't even think he makes movies anymore, but, like, for a long time, he was a guy who, like, every year he would come out with a movie and he had like a devoted fan base or whatever, so it would the movies wouldn't cost that much. uh and he would do various things where like by the end I think he was like filming them all in Europe because they gave him like special tax credits or something, to make it cheaper if you film there or other stuff. But it just got a lot harder for him for stuff like that to be done. And there's a guy who's like got an established reputation. There's a lot of people who work with him. I'm sure it's like hard for people to do that. You know, considering all the alternatives, people got their phones. Young people just like watching YouTube. They don't even want to go to they don't even like watch streaming necessarily. They're just on YouTube. Now I'm starting to sound like a cranky old man, but I think all this stuff kind of plays into it. It's like, what can you, um, I w- like, what can you actually get made now, as opposed to before? I was listening to Justine Bateman. She's the actress, filmmaker, or whatever, on a podcast. She was on a podcast with Bret Easton Ellis, the novelist. And one of the things that she said now is like, now, if you're trying to make, a TV show or a movie or whatever, there's a term, I think it's called like second device or second viewing, it's something like that. It's like basically you when you're writing a script, you have to write it in such a way that a person who is kind of like on their phone, half paying attention, is not gonna feel lost, you know? So like everything has to be like not only do you have to
So
like
does that it's gotta be dumbed down then.
gotta be dumbed down and, like, you have to actually say, like, the characters have to, like, say everything and other stuff like that. Yeah, so that's not conducive to making great art. So I've talked for a long
So
time.
so this so they gotta do you gotta say as well as show?
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah,
'Cause
show
the
and
whole thing is
tell.
you yeah, because the whole thing is, like, you don't you show and you don't tell. So what you're partly what you're trying to say is like, it's technology driven because I tried to look up the top ranked TV shows, and it's not as easy as back in the day because how do you account for streaming versus just like sitting down and watching the weekly sitcom or the weekly drama, you know?
Right.
Apparently this show called Severance is very big right now. I don't know what that is. I mean, I can imagine, but
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched it. It's produced by Ben Stiller. I don't think he's in it, and the premise excuse me. The premise of the show is that, like, the characters, they go to work in some secret corporation, and as part of working there, they, like, split their brain so that when they go into work, they don't remember their life outside of work, and then when they leave work, they don't remember their life in work, and I gotta be like, people say it's great. I've never watched it. To be honest, it didn't seem like a very enticing premise of a show to me.
all right. So
Um,
I'm kind of retarded. I thought it had to do with the payments that happen when you're laid off. So I did never actually like
well, that's the
looked into
like,
it.
severance is like they're severing their lives or
Yeah,
whatever, but
yeah.
I don't
Yeah, I mean, I don't I watched the movies like I went to watch Oppenheimer. Was there I don't know if I watched a
know
film
years
since
ago.
Oppenheimer.
Did you not see
Yeah.
Megalopolis?
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, I did.
And
I saw
Dune,
Megalopolis.
we went to Dune together, so I know you
And
saw that.
Dune 2. Because Dune 1 was during the pandemic, and I think I saw Dune 1 on the streaming.
Yeah. Yeah, the only adult movies I saw last year were Megapolis in the theater, were Megapolis and, Dune 2, but I did see
Yeah.
5 or 6 kids, there's Inside Out, there was a Despicable
Yeah.
Me,
I think
that
I went to see that with my kids, actually.
yeah,
So I think we have, like, similarities there. Um, and then, I mean, part of the issue is, I work on the computer, I'm subscribed to all these, like, things, and so sometimes I'll just be like, "Oh, what's on the streaming?" You know?
right,
It's not like it's not like appointment viewing, it's just spur of the moment viewing, and I don't wanna watch I watched a couple of things, like, I watched The Witcher, the initial, like, the pre whatever, the new ones are gonna be weird, but,
yeah.
there's some things that I watch, but really, not much of a episodic, series watcher anymore. I mean, there's other things to do, other things I'm not doing, so, I guess one of the issues that I wanna bring up, though, is rationality and efficiency, so, the comic book movies up until, what was it, like, was it the 20 was it in 2019 when the first, like, phase of the Marvel something like that,
Yes.
universe,
The
ended?
they ended, and I just wanna say, like, looking back on that, that w like, from a logistical standpoint, that was kind of an amazing thing. They had, like, 17 movies over the course of 10 years, building, start like, all sorts of stuff coulda happened, like, Robert Downey Jr. coulda got like, someone coulda gotten in an accident, there's other stuff, and they managed to, like, build it, and they completed it, like, the last movie I think came out in, like, fall or winter of 2019, you know? Like,
Yeah.
they got it really like, obviously, you couldn't have known that there was gonna be a pandemic, but, like, imagine if their schedule had been like, "Okay, and then, like, Christmas
Yeah.
2020, that's when we launched the big Infinity War," the conclusion like, it could have gone disastrously wrong, so, yeah, they came down to the wire on that. Um,
Well, I mean, so they made a lot of money on all these movies, but, people did start talking about the fact that, you know, they're not generic, but, there's no, shall we say, adult themes. Most of the fights don't result in death most of the time. When they do die, it's kind of like TV show deaths almost, where it's not like very gruesome. They're just like, or whatever. Or like they jump into something. So it's kind of a little bit anodyne that way. The plots are not very complicated, and there's some sort of like beam that goes into the sky, you know? So, Okay, so all of that was happening. They're executed pretty well. Most all the movies made money. There were various levels of success. Like Iron Man and Guardians of the Galaxy were very successful. Thor and Ant Man were less successful, but they were all successful.
Yeah.
Now they're actually starting to like release ones that are not successful. Like whatever magic there was, people are just tired of it. But what happened here is they had a formula. The formula worked, and you just keep going back to the formula over and over and over again. But humans can be fickle, and at some point, they just got tired of the formula, you know? I
Right.
mean,
Well,
for a while, we got yeah.
and I mean, they also lost all their stars, you know, like one thing about the like phase whatever movies is like the first movies, I mean, you weren't obviously people were in it for different reasons, but they like most of the like Chris Evans, Captain America, Robert Downey's Iron Man, um, Hemsworth is Thor or whatever, you know, their contracts were all up, and so they're like, "Okay, well, we'll just get new people," right? Who and other than the guy who plays Spider-Man, Tom Holland, it's hard for me to actually think of any like, who are the, like, big names or even names in, like, these later
Is
movies?
isn't the Guardians of the Galaxy guy, um, what's his name?
Chris Pratt?
Yeah,
I guess
he's
they
still there.
he yeah, I guess so. Did they do another I guess they did another Guardians of the Galaxy movie maybe? I don't know. And they did another Doctor Strange that had, uh, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Cumberbatch, yeah. Yeah, that's okay, but it had those have not done as well.
Yeah, right,
Well, I mean, I think part of it is, like, honestly, I'm not a big, superheroes person, but, like, they're doing multiverse now, and it's starting to get really complicated,
right, yeah, that
and,
makes it yeah,
I mean, the issue is these films are supposed to be simple,
right,
and easy to follow, they're not, like, deep art, complicated. Then once they start get complicated, like, hard like, very nerdy, I'm just like, "Ah, I don't really wanna." You know what I'm saying? Like, I started wa I mean, I will, I think, like, people know this because I've said this in various podcasts. I started watching superhero films because around 2010, I realized, I didn't have a TV, didn't really watch many movies, very detached from pop culture. I know what
yeah,
was happening in music because this is before, I know it was before Spotify, Pandora, I think, or like, it was around when they started, but, I wasn't using them. I didn't know what was going on, and so I was like, "You know what? It's really simple to go watch a Marvel movie. It's not that much investment in time." And then when, like, retarded people are like, "Did you see the latest Thor? Like, did you see all the cool things he did that are, like,
right.
just like a cartoon?" And I'm like, "Yeah," like, and I can, like, talk about all the things very simply without, like, much
Yeah,
investment. It's like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then boom, I'm connected to the average person who wants to, like, talk about the latest movie, and so I think that's one of the things that, people need to realize is that, this sort of pop culture in these movies, they give you something to talk about, and they bind you together with the rest of the culture in a world where we're kind of, like, a little bit isolated and atomized.
yeah. I will say, so there's that issue, but, the arty films, the higher cinema, like the Best Picture nominees or whatever, also seems like they kinda suck a little bit now. I admit I haven't seen any of the Best Picture nominees this year, and none of them really looked appealing, but I've seen, like, clips, and I read the Wikipedia pages or whatever, and I know people who have gone and seen The Brutalist and have said that it was really great. To be honest, it does not seem, like, very appealing to me. It seems like it would be kind of, like, boring and, like, dreary to watch. Amelia Perez, which is, like, about a Mexican drug lord who's trans, which is a musical, seems kinda weird. Uh, I I don't know if it's a Nora or something like that, which is just, like, about, like, a prostitute
Yeah.
married, you know?
Well, let me. I haven't, like, kept track of it, but it's like IMDb has, like, what? It has, the list of,
Yeah.
I think, Best Picture winners. So Oppenheimer in 2023, okay, that's a legit film.
Yes.
Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, I have no idea. It's about a Chinese
That's a
immigrant. Oh,
multiverse.
okay, yeah.
That's a multiverse.
Yeah,
It's like a action.
yeah, I didn't watch that.
Yeah.
Coda, Family's Fishing Fishing Business, Nomadland, Woman in Her 60s, Parasite. Oh, okay, the Parasite I watched.
Parasite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Paras
Yeah. I haven't seen it, but that was
Green
good. And
yeah, Green Book, The Shape of Water, that was apparently, like, the worst.
that
People
was
complain about that winning.
awful, awful movie about a woman who wants to have sex with a fish, and who and also
Moonlight
Buddhism.
Moonlight, a man grapples I don't even remember what
Moonlight is like
what?
a gay black coming of
Oh,
age
okay.
thing,
Spotlight, that's about the Catholic priest scandal, I
right?
guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Birdman, okay, I heard about that. 12 Years a Slave, okay. Argo, okay.
I
The
saw art.
Artist,
That's probably the
yeah.
I saw The Artist, yeah, sure,
The King's Speech,
saw
okay,
that.
yeah. Slumdog Millionaire. Okay, why Hurt Locker, okay, I think, like, No Country for Old Men,
Yeah,
okay,
that
maybe I'm just not paying attention, but a lot of these older winners, okay, Crash, $1 Million Baby, The Lord of the Rings, Chicago, A Beautiful Mind, Gladiator, American, okay, all of these old Shakespeare in Love, all of these older ones are notable to me, actually.
yeah.
It seems like they're going for more obscure films, or am I wrong?
Yes, and I don't think it's just because you've gotten old and out of touch. I do think there was a deliberate strategy, um, in the olden days, like, in the past, the idea of the best pictures was, you nominate pictures which are good, but which are also popular. A lot of people have seen it, so people will tune into the awards. They'll want to see what it's done. And now it does seem like they've kind of given up on that and have kind of deliberately taken a strategy of trying to pick movies that were not that popular, to give them either a boost or some critical compensation for not making a lot of money. I do think this year Wicked got nominated, which very popular Broadway play. I don't know if the movie made a lot of money or not. Probably it did okay.
Yeah, I think it was very successful.
So that's still an example of that. But like the other ones, um, I don't think they're like huge box office smashes, which is fine. But it doesn't seem like they're really like I don't think any of those movies would stack up against um, some of the movies from, like, prior years, right? I don't see like, the
Yeah,
brutal
they feel different, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like, The Brutalist or Nora, if they were up against, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or No Country for Old Men, like, it just wouldn't like, no one would consider them, uh, Best Picture contenders, I believe, even though I haven't seen them. So, yeah, I mean, it just seems like quality's gone down. And one other thing, I don't know how big a factor this is, but certainly if you look back to the movies from like the 90s and the early 2000s, that classic era, a lot of them did have one thing in common, which is they were produced by Harvey Weinstein. And, like obviously he had his problems. I I think it's perfectly reasonable that he had to go, but it does seem like he also did have a talent for, like, making for, like, picking
Yeah.
what could be a good movie and getting stars and all that other stuff. So
Well,
I'm not
yeah.
like, you have to let people like Harvey, abuse women or what,
Mhm.
certainly not, but it's possible
Well,
that
your point
quality has suffered because of that.
yeah, well, you're pointing to a demographic shift, which everyone talks about. People, I forget who it was that we was that like a thing, and someone was talking about how, they're from LA, and, it is totally true. It is totally true. Yeah, actually, okay. I was in San Francisco recently. Guy came up from LA and he's like, it is totally true that in the last 5 years, like since 2020, um, really hard, there has been a proactive push to make the writer's room not just Jewish guys.
Right.
So bringing a lot more women, a lot of black women, minorities and gays and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that does affect things.
Gay
But
guys
I'm
can
gonna
be
say like
Jewish too, so
what?
I said gay guys can still be Jewish, so that's not
Yeah, yeah. But like the straight Jewish guy
right,
is the Jerry Seinfeld, a little bit
right.
of a horn dog there, you know. But that guy is kind of being pushed out. So I do know that the Witcher TV show, which I watched, and the reason that Henry Cavill, who was a Witcher fan, and he kind of pushed himself into the main role. He auditioned, he'd read the books and all this stuff, and played the games. He's a very hardcore nerd. So the reason he's leaving is because he doesn't think that the Witcher TV show was staying true to its roots, and it was
Right,
basically a battle between him and the producers and the writers.
right,
And one thing, that was really clear, is there's a demographic difference where, um, a lot of the writers that were complaining were women,
uh-huh,
and, you know, they wanted to do their own thing and, like, kinda like, uh, you know, I don't know, just, feel their own creative bliss, I guess,
right.
and that did not, align with the kinda thing that Henry Cavill's interested. I mean, he's
Yeah,
going on to produce Warhammer, so men and women are different and they're interested in different sorts of things. And, no matter how much you use The Witcher as a foundation, like the basic stories by this Polish like science fiction novelist or fantasy novelist, if you have a female showrunner and a bunch of female writers, how is that not going to affect the product, you know? Like,
right.
they will write what they know and what they wanna see. I mean, they obviously didn't turn it into Bridgerton, but, I don't know, things have changed apparently, in the show and because I didn't read the book, so I don't know. My only point is, like, I know that that's a clear case where, just kinda like the needs of the writers, of the people, yeah, the people, who are writing is driving the creative process. Oh, okay, I have another story. I have actually this is the one that I will tell. There was, like, a bunch of other stories of, like, crazy things, that writers in Hollywood or, like, Hollywood executives, wanted to greenlight. So, a guy, he wanted to write a wholesome family film about, like, 2 families that go on vacation in Europe, in Provence. There's, like, regular American families and just
Yeah.
figuring out Europe together as the 2 American families. And, they had kids of all ages. And so he pitched this, to Hollywood studio. And, the executives came back and was like, "We love this, but, we wanna, like, add a twist. Can the 2 12-year-old boys fall in love with each other?" I was like he was like, that would kinda change the whole tone of the. So the
Right,
point is, they the executives and the writers, they have certain cultural sensibilities. This is different than, say, the 20th century when Louis B. Mayer and, Zanuck and all these, like, these guys often are first generation or children of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, but they
right.
really, really want to figure out what the average American wants, and they wanna be very wholesome and very American, whatever their politics. Whereas now today, I think, like, a lot of the creatives, like, they want, to kinda, like, express their creativity and, like, focus on what they wanna focus on, and that's obviously caused problems. It's like there's two ways you go. You create a product that really only has a totally tiny niche based on your own preferences, or this kinda, like, generic mass market tentpole. So we have these 2 extreme things. Whereas I think in the past we had like a more range of films that were kind of in the middle. And my attitude towards like say like message films, whatever, and I did like a podcast with Peachy Keenan, who's a conservative writer, former Disney writer, is that like really really like hit you over the head message films are often not good art and don't have, like, a mass market appeal. I mean, they have their role, but, then there's the other balance where a film is just, I mean, really bland. I mean, I feel like most of the Marvel films, they were okay, but they're really bland.
Yeah.
It's not like you think years later, "Wow, Thor 3 was powerful." The relationship
Uh-huh.
between Thor and his
Right.
father, it was just like, stuff happens, and, wow, that's badass,
Yeah.
and then, "Oh, wow, Thor's, like, gonna be naked now because all the women want him to be naked," and I don't know, it's like
I must
some
have
of
missed that part. I don't think that I
well, I think in the latest Thor, he was, he was, in at, like, Zeus's, like, court or something. It was, yeah, the latest Thor with, um with Christian Bale, and, Zeus, like, went like, "Boo," and, like, all his clothes got ripped off, and, like, Thor was like this, and all the women are like, and it was kinda one of those things where, "Okay, let's just, like, change the sexes." That would not fly,
well, maybe
today.
not now. I mean, it might have flowed back in, like, the '80s or whatever. Wait a minute. Zeus is a Greek god. Thor is
In the
Norse.
yeah, in the multiverse, they're together, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
he's
I
in
haven't
Z
seen
yeah,
that
yeah.
one. Maybe,
Yeah, yeah. So it's all super complicated. Everything is getting super complicated, and I'm not gonna watch everything. So I've actually stopped watching the Marvel stuff habitually because
yeah.
I feel like it's actually not as central to our culture anymore because it's just gotten too complicated for people to follow, and they're just kind of not interested in it. And also, a lot of the Zoomers that are coming up, they don't have the attention span for this sort of stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't follow it much myself. I wasn't even aware, that Zeus was now a character or whatever, so
yeah, it's played by Russell Crowe.
oh, okay, sure, that makes sense, yeah. Um, yeah, so, some of these things are kinda cyclical, hopefully new stuff will develop, um, and to be
Yeah.
honest, at least in this phase of my life, like, when I was a kid, and maybe some of this was because, you know, like, smartphones didn't exist, so we couldn't be on the phone all the time. The internet was around, but it wasn't like, YouTube wasn't didn't exist, I don't think, or, wasn't as accessible, but, like, I would see a lot of movies, you know? Like, when I was in college or when I was in, like, the last couple of years of high school or whatever, I mean, I'd see, like, 2, 3 movies a week, right? And now, even if I mean, maybe it's, a bright side of movies kinda sucking is that, like, I wouldn't be able to see a lot of them now even if I wanted to, because I just got a lot of other stuff going on, you know? So, maybe that's part of it too, I don't know. People got
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot more media, a lot more streams, so, I guess we should, like, move to, Doge stuff. So
yes.
Doge, it's the whole Doge thing is kind of funny because, people before the or, like, before they started doing things, were like, "Oh, this is just, like, some fig leaf to make Elon seem like he's important," and now it turns out that, we hear a lot more about Elon than, like, JD, although JD is doing things. I'm just saying that Elon is a big, big deal in the
Big
government right now.
in some ways, I mean, uh, to some extent, we hear more about Elon than Trump. Certainly, the Democrats, the media, to some extent, have kind of focused on Elon as public enemy number 1, even more so than Trump this time. Maybe, and there's reasons for that. Maybe they wanna drive a wedge between Trump and Elon. Maybe they feel like Trump, they they shot their shot with him, it didn't work. With Elon, they still have a chance, who knows, but there's a lot of, like, there's a lot of focus specifically on Elon, and I actually wonder, I was looking it's very hard to know the reality of what's going on, right? Because the media, I don't consider it very reliable, and there's just like a lot of noise out there. And so, one thing that I was looking at is during Trump's first term, at the very beginning, he started roughly even in terms of, like, his job approval numbers, you know? It wasn't great, but it was, it was like 45, 45, something like that. And then he got in, and then basically for the first 6, 8 months of his administration, it just, like, he slowly bled, you know, until he kinda stabilized somewhere in the, like, high 30s, and then for the rest of the term, it was just kinda flat, that's where it was. So, this time, Trump started at roughly at the same place he started in term 1, it was roughly even, maybe like 45%, 45, something like that. And so I was curious, it's like, well, is the same thing gonna happen, where he just, like, goes down? And we're still in month 1, we gotta remind ourselves of that. But so far, actually, not only has he not bled off any support, it seems like he's actually gone up a little bit. Like, you start to see he's getting, like, plus 50% approval in some polls and so on and so forth. And I wonder if, I mean, there's different reasons for that. Obviously, the administration's doing a lot more stuff quicker than it did the last time, so that could, that could be a factor. But they're also getting attacked a lot for it. But I do wonder if the decision of the Democrats, liberals, whatever, to focus all their fire on Elon is actually helping Trump, right? Because if Elon takes the hit, like, who cares what his job approval is? Like, he's not running for anything. Trump isn't running for anything anymore either. But maybe, like, and like, some of the criticism of Elon is phrased in a way that actually makes Trump look good. AOC was something like, "Well, Elon wasn't elected president. Donald Trump is our president, not Elon," right? Like, can you imagine AOC saying, like, "Donald Trump is the
Uh,
legitimately elected president. He's the one who was elected."
awkward.
Yeah. So I wonder if that, is affecting things in terms of, like, the public perceptions. We could talk more about, like, the reality of what's happening with DOGE or whatever, but just, like, big picture, that seems like what's, like, the dynamic is all the focus is on Elon.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing with Doge is, to me, it's, like, also confusing a little bit in terms of what it can do because it's like,
Yeah.
get rid of these," and then, like, okay, like, do you need legislation? Like, is the executive
Right.
gonna do it? It's, like, very hard for people to understand how this is working. It's not the regular process.
Yes, I agree, and, one of I think a lot of the I think there's kind of, like, we're kind of in the first phase of Doge, and there will come, like, a second and third phase. Like, right now, the issue most of the stuff is going on is discretionary spending, and specifically grants and contracts with people got grants or contracts from the federal government that were already entered into before Trump became president, and they're, like, canceling stuff like that, and there's questions of legality, there's questions of, reasonableness or appropriateness, and it's kind of hard to know what's going on necessarily. I do know people, I've heard people who are, conservative, who I respect, who have been kind of critical of some of the Doge moves. Um, Stuart Buck, yeah, you know Stuart?
Yeah, I know Stewart. I've known St well, I mean, so we've hung out in Austin because he lives in Houston, but wait, funny Stewart Buck story.
Yeah.
I followed him, I've added him to my blog roll in 2002 because my friend Joel Gruss had him on his blog roll, and I thought Stewart was interesting.
Uh huh.
So he was kinda, like, on my blog roll for, like, a decade. I didn't really know him too well, but then on social media, he followed me, so I followed him back. And, so there was I forget what it was, but something that Arnold Ventures funded to come to Austin to some, like, investment tech thing, and Stuart Buck was gonna be there, and I was like, "Hey, Stuart, it's Razib Khan." He was like, "Oh, yeah, I know you from the internet." I'm like, "Yeah."
Right.
"Yeah, like, I followed you because, my friend Joel Gruss," and he's like, "Who's Joel Gruss?" And I'm like, "Okay, like, that's fair. It was a long time ago. Joel just, like, linked to him, and he linked to
Right.
Joel, but whatever." And then I told Joel, I'm like, "Funny story, I ran into Stuart Buck, and, like, he didn't even know who you were, even though I found out about him through you." And he's like, "Who's Stuart Buck?"
Right. Yeah. So I mean, Stewart's a guy that I have known on the internet for 20 years, and I met him in person, like, just a year or 2 ago. He's very tall, but, so I mean, he now works a lot in, like, I think he's runs the Good Science Project, something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of it is focused on government research, and so he wrote something about, like, because they've canceled, like, specifically a lot of DOE contracts with, the IES, which is the Something Education Service, which is kinda like the quant research department of DOE, so they canceled a bunch of studies in progress and other things like that, and, Stewart was just writing that, like, this doesn't make any like, it doesn't make any sense to cancel these projects. A lot of them have been going on for years, like, a lot of the research, is, like, in late stages, so it's not like you're saving any money by doing it this way, and it's not really wasteful. Um, on the other side of it, I think, like, the guy who was head of the IES during the Trump and Biden administrations, I forget his name, it's like Schneider or something. He gave a talk recently and he was like, "Oh yeah, I support what DOGE is doing because a lot of this research is like low quality, it's no good." So it's hard to say, you know? It's hard to figure out like what the truth is.
Yeah, so I will say that, I mean, when you're talking about research, they're like going at overheads at the NIH,
Right,
which is like basically the proportion for every grant that's like not for the direct research in the lab, but like supports
right.
other things and all these things. Like some of it's administrative, some of it is lab. Uh, you know, um, like basically, some people are saying, look, if you don't have NIH grants that have like big overhead, every university is going to shift towards humanities programs because they're just like cheaper to run.
Yeah,
Science labs need facilities, they need maintenance of those facilities, and they need, like, reagents and other things in the lab for those facilities, right? It's like all of that stuff has to be together.
right.
And that's expensive. So that's like a capital input. But it is also true that some of the overhead goes to supporting the administrative staff, and a lot of them are just frankly not. They have to make work for themselves. They have to cause they have to, like, have meetings, and so the meetings are meetings that the faculty sometimes have to join, the faculty don't like to join the meeting. It's just, like, it is detrimental to the, aim of the institution. So, this is hard. You pick the good with the bad. It's all together. They're doing it at warp speed. So, not surprising that they're gonna like knock a lot of things that are good, as well as doing some things that are, bad at the same time because it's hard to unbundle and disaggregate. And that's a big problem with academic research and academia. It's hard to unbundle because we know that a lot of this stuff is important, like material science research that might be relevant to chips. But
Right,
then, like, combined with that is like the DEI of like forest ecology or something stupid,
right.
which is like either useless or like, literally deleterious? So, I mean, I think part of the problem is, when people say, like, DOGE is, like, horrible and, like, unconstitutional, are we just gonna continue this way forever? Because the way the bureaucratic state works is it just doesn't shrink.
Right.
They just keep adding layers and layers and layers until at some point we will just, grind to a halt like much of Europe has,
Yeah.
with bureaucratic overhead.
Yeah, and, it's disruptive, some of that is messy, it's unfortunate. To some extent, I think that, like, probably some of the disruption is part of the strategy because from a political economy point of view, you're taking people who are adversarial to you and you're putting them off balance, and everybody is, like, scrambling to focus on their own, trying to maintain their own budgets or whatever, which means they can't devote all their time to, like, defeating your agenda in other areas. This is, like, whatever was happening now, though, I do think, like, this is an initial phase because, like, these are grants that already went out. Like, at some point, the issue is going to be making new grants, and new dispersables, and like either they're gonna like scale back what they do, or they can make grants to like aligned people, or not like. They're not gonna like, they don't have to cancel the DEI grant because 'cause they're not making any more DEI grants for the next 4 years or whatever, and,
Mhm.
so that's coming. I think that's, like, phase 2, and then phase 3, of course, is some of this stuff, I think, and, maybe this is putting a positive spin on it, but, like, there's some stuff where I think they're laying down markers because, like, really, whether it's, like, USAID or some even the, like, overhead thing, probably there are things that you have to change in the law, or Congress has to act in order for it to happen. But by DOGE, like, setting it out that they're doing this, that puts pressure on Congress to actually make these changes, and so that's gonna be, like, where the rubber really hits the road is, like, what can they do in Congress, in terms of appropriations, spending, and so forth. So,
Mhm.
but, like, at some point, we're gonna move from the, like, bickering over, some 5-year grant that is 3 years in, and they're canceling the rest of the grant, and it's gonna go to, like, what's gonna come out of Congress, that'll be the focus of DOGE, right? And DOGE, I guess it's only, like, 18 months, right? Like, that's the plan is it's supposed
Mhm.
to sunset, uh, July 4th, 2026, so they don't have a lot of time really. Uh,
Yep. Yep.
so yeah, I mean,
They got raised through 18 months. I mean, that's a lot of the adult life of some of the Doge staffers too. A
right,
lot
right.
of, if you're 19 years old, it's like, whoa, most of your adult life has been in Doge. Hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. To listen to the rest of it, please go to conversation.substack.com.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. It's not about who's wrong or right, but understanding others' light. In civil discourse, we can find the ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. As dawn broke soft on dewy grass, they smiled and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand on any aspects of the lyrics or discuss the themes further?